Welcome everyone, both on Zoom and Facebook. This is the Paint the Mission watercolor class for people of all ages. This is part of the mission's month-long virtual Earth Day celebration. My name is Jessica Crossman. I am the Director of Education here at the Mission. I am joined today by Melanie Rayburn, who is our Education Staff Artist in Resident. She is going to be leading the watercolor class today. So as I said before, it's designed to be enjoyed by people of all ages, along with your family, your friends. It's accessible to people of all levels of experience. Let me turn things over to Melanie. She's going to give you a little introduction to the mission and then to what we're going to be doing today. Take it away, Melanie.
All right. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Melanie. I'm here in our central courtyard. It's beautiful today. Happy Earth Day. We have flowers blooming, butterflies, birds, bunnies, everything here today. We love celebrating the earth and all the beautiful things we have here at the Mission. If you don't already have your supplies next to you, make sure you have some watercolor paints. I'm using just Crayola $2 set that I bought as my paint. It was perfect quality. Some watercolor paper is going to be better because it'll take the water a little bit easier, won't wrinkle. So make sure you have some sort of paper, a pencil, obviously a paintbrush. And then I also suggest a Sharpie because the picture we're going to do today, we're going to do some outlines just to help us define our shapes so we don't have to be so careful as we're painting. It could be a little more loose.
And don't forget the water to dip your brush in, right?
Yes, that too. Water and watercolor paints. Now I'll go give you guys a beautiful view of our central courtyard. So many things in bloom right now. Now the picture we're doing today is based off of a picture I took a couple months ago. And unfortunately that bush is no longer blooming today, but I can show you here. This was the bush. And then I actually have the painting we're gonna do. So I can kind of hold it up so you can see. There was big, beautiful pink flowers. There are no longer any, but I can
share the photo right now, the original photo that you had taken, Melanie.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll share it so people can see kind of side by side. And it, such a beautiful, just so people can see that right there. The really beautiful pink flower with the arches. Yeah, wonderful. Okay, I'll go ahead and stop sharing so you can continue, but just so people get an idea of what your original inspiration was.
Definitely. So again, that was the picture, and then here is the painting we're going to be based off today. And before I go in and start setting up my paints, I'll share some things blooming today. This is a camellia tree right here. Beautiful, usually pink, white blossoms. And then look at this tree. Those colors, so beautiful. Our roses are in bloom right now as well. We're just gonna get inspiration from all of our plants here. These look a little bit similar to the ones we're gonna do. I'm just heading back to our office and I'm gonna get set up.
Yeah, what I'll do, Melanie, is I'll take your video off so you can get set up in the office.
Okay.
And I will tell everyone about our virtual Earth Day celebration. Our virtual Earth Day celebration is something that we started last year in 2020. And it was done out of necessity originally, but we had such a wonderful success with it that we decided to actually continue it into 2021. And along with all of the live streams that we had today, so this one is our third of the day, and it will be the last one that we are doing today. We also have a special web page on our website that I will share with you right now. On that page, as well as the live streams that you saw today, we are going to end up sharing onto that page. But we also have a whole other set of videos that are science and nature themed. that you'll be able to enjoy all month. And they'll even be on the website after the month is up. So let me just kind of scroll down and show you. We have a Native American basket weaving video, which is just so wonderful. It was made with some of the Native American basket weaving volunteers who volunteer here at the mission. We have a number of videos shared with us by the Discovery Cube Foundation, one of our education partners, and they're just wonderful, fun videos. There's some music in them, and we're really grateful to the Discovery Cube for sharing those with us to be able to share with you. We also have a video that was created by someone that we work with quite often, Susie Vanderlip. She's a monarch conservation specialist, pardon me, and also a local author. And she talks about making a butterfly-friendly garden, specifically for monarchs. On that page too, we also have a special nature scavenger hunt activity. I just clicked on it so you can see here. This is for you to be able to print. You can use this at home, or you can come use it here at the mission too. So it looks like Melanie is set up and ready to go. Perfect. There you are. Oh, lovely setup. I'm going to go ahead and mute myself and let you take over, showing everybody the beautiful watercolor painting.
Yeah. All right, guys. So I have my paints here, my water, got my brush, pencil, my watercolor paper. Now, if you haven't done so already, or if you want to, I just traced actually the painting I did. You can use any sort of more vertical rectangle. Any size, doesn't really matter. Smaller, just use less paint. So I'll give you guys a second to do that. Have, some form of a rectangle so we know kind of where a painting's going to start and end. I'd say mine right now is probably about 5 inches by maybe 8. If I had to guess, that's just the size of the original painting that I did. Now, every good painting will start with a good sketch. So I'm just going to do a simple little sketch, kind of help me figure out where I'm going to put each color. So I'm going to start actually with the arch and kind of the more architecture element. So I'm going to start actually with this kind of trapezoid shape for the top of the column where the arch comes off of. So I'm going to go a little bit halfway up my page. I'm going to do that kind of trapezoid shape. So I'm just going to bring a line out, maybe about 2 or so inches, bring kind of a line down, make it a little darker so you guys can see it, and then finish it like that. Gonna go in a little bit, just do the column. The column's just gonna meet down inside basically plants. So I'm not gonna do it all the way down, and I'm gonna do kind of a general kind of plant green line. Now let's do the other side. We want it to be the same height. This one's not gonna come out as far. I'm just gonna do same shape, try to make it the same width as the other side. Actually gonna make that a little smaller. There we go. And then same thing, just bring a line down and it'll just disappear inside of our greenery we're gonna paint. Now for the arch, I'm gonna do this line first, and then I'm gonna add the inner line. So for arches, it's kind of hard because they are, symmetrical. What I like to do is do a kind of a line right in the center. And I'm gonna bring this side just up, try to make it nice and light. So if I want to erase it, and bring it down, and then kind of check both sides, see if they're pretty close in their arch, which I think I'm pretty happy with that. So now I'm going to do this inner line. This makes it, gives it that 3-dimensional feel. It's going to end right about here, right there. So I'm going to go from here. And we're bringing a nice, almost the same curvature as that first line down. And it's going to meet the top of my pillar.
So Melanie, I just want to relay a question that we have right now. So somebody's asking if maybe you could go a little bit slower. I think,
of course.
I think people want to make sure they're getting it just right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we'll take a second right here. Maybe clean up our archway. Pencil's good, obviously, so then you can erase, fix any mistakes. Arches are pretty hard, so don't get discouraged if you know it's not perfect. We can always adjust slightly with paint. Next, I'm going to go into the flowers. I'm only going to draw maybe 2 or 3 of the main flowers. The other ones, we don't really need to fill those in because they're basically just going to be little pink splotches. And then the Sharpie we're going to add at the end will give us some definition, show us, oh, that actually is a flower. So I'm going to do the first flower right down here. And I know kind of how big I want it to be, so I'm just going to kind of hint, maybe I'll do like a light oval. And then I kind of call this my wiggle drawing technique, where if it's something in nature, you know, doesn't have super defined lines, just do a couple wiggles. Not a proper word, but you can see here, just, you know, some wiggly lines. Then I'll just add a few petals, kind of define the shape of my flower, and then the oval that I drew helps to define the size. There's one kind of wiggly flower. Again, we're going to be painting over this, and then we are going to add Sharpie on top. So this is just to help us, you know, get the overall shape where we're going to put our colors. Going to do another one kind of up here, more in the upper part of the arch, almost sticking out of the bush. So maybe I'll hint again with a nice light oval so I know what size I want it to be. And then just like before, I kind of do some wiggly petals, and then the outer petals on the outside for that oval outline. So this is better speed for everyone. I want to make sure we're able to keep everyone with me. I'm going to do another one facing this way rather. So kind of right here in this middle area. Nice light oval. I actually might make it a bit smaller. These flowers are not all, they were all in the same spot. They'd be the same size as these. There's ones that are closer to us, and then there's ones that are farther away. So we're getting kind of that perspective of distance with just making a big flower in the front and smaller flowers towards the back. So I'm going to make this one a little smaller, leaning out a different direction. Going to add in some wiggle petals and then the outer petals on the outside. Now I might add maybe 2 more. And these will be the small ones in the back, so we know they're further back away from us in our painting and in our drawing. This one, I think I'll just do just a little tiny shape, irregular shape, like a flower almost, just so I know I'm going to put some pink right there. This is kind of our preliminary drawing. Again, doesn't have to be perfect. We are going to paint over all this, and then we are going to go on top of it with some Sharpie once our paint is dry and define our shapes. So next, we are going to get into our paints. We're going to start with the color green. We're going to fill in kind of this empty space around our flowers. So I have my Crayola paint set here. Whatever colors we're going to use today, which will definitely be green, yellow, red, probably purple, the brown if you have a brown. Go ahead, just get those colors a little wet. You have some water on them. Just, pick up some water. And then we can use colors straight from our tray here, or we can mix them. Depends on if you guys have somewhere to mix. I'm just going to use the lid of here to get kind of more of the color I want, but it is up to you if you want to use straight from your color palette. So I'm going to put some water in here and I'm going to add some green, maybe some yellow. The two colors that make green are yellow and blue. So if we add yellow and if we add blue, it should still stay a green color. Just maybe get a little bit darker, a little bit lighter, depending on what we add. Now my green is super bright. Now, if you like bright colors, that's great. We'll use a bright green. I like mine a little more dull. Now, the opposite of green on the color wheel is the color red. If I add red to this, it actually makes it a little bit more dull, not as bright. So I'm actually going to add a little tiny bit of red to my green. Now, one thing that's really fun with watercolors is the technique called wet into wet, where when your paint's wet, you can put wet paint into it, and it kind of makes almost like a marbling, really nice soft line. So we're going to do that on our green today. So I have my base green, and I'm going to start just filling in the area around my flowers. So no real proper way to paint watercolor, but I'm just going to start filling it in towards the top. I'm not going to make it just a straight line. I'm trying to give it a little bit more of a, like a natural line, like a bush. Try to keep your paint wet if you can. Go around our flower shapes. It's okay if you go a little bit into them. Totally fine. And actually, this Crayola set is pretty good. I'm very impressed with it. Remember, we're going right up, kind of our pillars there on the archway are just going to meet our green. So just meet your line you drew. Now, my paint's all wet right here. So actually, I'm going to dip a little bit of yellow into it. And we can see it's pretty bright. But the yellow will, if the paint is wet, kind of disperse and like blend into it really nicely. Maybe I'll do the same thing with the green straight from my palette. It just gives it just a little more variance, just adds a little more variety in it. So we're going to fill in all the way to the bottom. Make sure your paint is wet. This is watercolors. It wants to be wet. It won't spread very well if it is dry. And again, try experimenting, adding some green, some yellow, maybe even see what a little bit of blue would look like. If you put a little blue, almost like leaves, and you can spread it out. This technique is called wet into wet. Basically, exactly what we're doing. We're putting wet paint into already wet paint. Gonna put a little more yellow over here. Now we don't want to use too much water, but we want it to be wet enough that it'll spread. I'm going to add a little more blue, going to blend it in, maybe some more yellow. And again, just on this edge line, just give it like a natural look, not a perfectly straight line. Build it up in a little bit in some places. I'm actually going to mix, while my paint's still wet, I'm going to try to mix a darker green. So I'm going to do blue in the green I have, and I'm going to add red to it. Because remember, cross from green on the color wheel is red. So if you put red into it, it makes it darker, more dull. And eventually, with the right amount, it'll go gray. And with this dark green, I'm going to add almost like my flowers have some stems. Just kind of around the bottom of the few flowers I drew. Just give them some darker color to stand off against. And then I'll rinse my brush. I'm pretty happy with that green. It's not just a flat green. We can see yellows. We can see darker green. It's pretty wet, so I'm going to let that dry. Give you
Melanie,
guys.
it looks like somebody has a question.
Yeah.
Somebody named Jonathan has a question. Jonathan, if you could type that into the Q&A section on your Zoom, that would be helpful for us so we could see what your question is. And I will let you know, Melanie, if we get that written on there.
Perfect.
Yeah, go ahead and you can keep going.
All right. So next we're gonna let this dry for a sec, and we're gonna move on to our arch. Now, a lot of the archways at the Mission have kind of a red-orange color. They use, red fired bricks. So that's the color we're gonna go for today. Kind of a red-brown. So I'm gonna, if we're mixing colors, which again, I'm just using the lid of my set, I'm going to get some water. I'm going to start with red. This is going to be a little bit too bright of a red, though. It's going to look probably not quite right. So we want to add maybe some orange. And then again, same as for green, if we want a dull red, we add the opposite of red, which is green. So we're just basically switching. So I'm going to add a little bit of green to my red-orange, and it's going to just make it more of a brown color rather than this bright orangey red. Another thing with watercolor is straight from here, the colors are going to be a bit brighter. But if you mix them with water and you add water to them, they're going to be lighter. So for this first wash I'm going to do in the archway, I'm going to go for a lighter wash because I want to add some detail on top, some, little pieces of brick. So I'm going to add quite a bit of water. And I got pretty nice, I guess you guys can't really see it because the table's brown, but it's a pretty nice light red-brown. Now I'm just going to do basically a flat wash in the whole archway. I'm going to hold off on the pillars though. So it's just going to be above those. And just like the green, I'm going to start at the top and work my way down. So I have, you can see it's a nice brick color that I've made here. And that was just red, orange, and a little bit of green. Watercolor is pretty fun where you don't always need to have it perfectly in the lines. That's kind of the fun part about it. So yeah, I'm going over my line a little bit here, but that's fine because I'm going to actually define my shape with a Sharpie when I'm done. And actually, I'm going to take back what I said. We are going to go into these top trapezoid shapes, these little top of our pillars. And even down into the column. Only thing is if your paint is still wet here at the green, it's going to bleed into it. So just be aware of that. I probably won't go all the way down quite yet because I don't want my green and my red brick color to mix. I'm going to go right next to it just because I don't want those colors to mix quite yet. My green's not dry.
So Melanie, we are having somebody asking you to slow down again.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay. It's just so exciting, right?
Yes. So we'll go ahead, give everyone a second to get to this point. We did a wet into wet wash for our green. We did a nice red orange color, our brick color for our archway. So go ahead, we'll give you guys a couple minutes, get caught up there. And I'll just let my painting dry for a little bit. Now, I will say the wash we did here, remember it was called wet into wet. What we did here was just a basic flat wash. So in case you guys want to impress anyone with your watercolor lingo, wet into wet and then flat. And what I'm doing right now, I don't know if you guys can see, I have a towel here and I'm actually just gonna dry my brush and I soak up any extra water. So if I have any like puddles or anything like that, I just pick it up with my water or pick it up with my brush and I dry the brush. This just will help us in our drying time. So hopefully you guys are getting somewhere close to here. Again, we have our green, our red brick color on our archways and our columns. And next, I'm actually going to add some of the details inside the column. So that's the bricks, maybe add a little bit more color. So I'm going to take the red brick color I have, which is right here. I'm going to make it maybe a little bit lighter. I'm going to put some yellow into it. Make it a little more orangey. And if yours is still slightly wet, that's fine. It'll be slightly wet into wet again. To make some of these brick shapes, I'm actually just going to do horizontal lines inside this area. So just going to start at the top with my color. It's going to kind of bleed into it and just do some lines inside for this brick texture. Now the archway is going to go a different direction. So I'm just going to do around the archway first. These ones will all be horizontal. And don't try to do, just one. Give them, alternate them. Bricks aren't stacked just one on top of each other. They are alternated. And if my color is perhaps a little bit too light, darken your color a little bit, maybe make it a little darker brown, red, and you can go again, do another, couple bricks here and there.
We do have another question, Melanie.
Yeah.
Someone says that your paintbrush looks like a really good paintbrush. Where can they find one like it?
You can find at most art stores. It actually can hold water inside of it, so you wouldn't need to dip it. I didn't want to do that today because I'm sure a lot of you guys probably don't have anything like this, but yeah, it's a watercolor brush that you don't need to travel with a bowl of water with. You can just put water inside the brush.
Very cool.
And yeah, you just squeeze it out. So very handy, definitely. And I like a brush with a nice thin point. The Crayola one that it came with wasn't the best quality. That's fine if you don't have anything else. But yeah, I just prefer a little more point on my brush. So I'm just going to add a couple more bricks. Again, this is just to the outer part. Maybe I might take some straight yellow and put in a little yellow too. Now for the archway, the bricks actually go a different direction. They follow the arch. So I'm going to add some in there, but I'm going to start out basically horizontal here, and they kind of almost twist with the arch. And again, I kind of started doing mine in a regular pattern. Try to make it irregular. The bricks aren't perfect. Change them up a little bit. And then again, you don't have to use just one color. Mix it in some other colors, maybe more red. The red you can really see. And if it's wet, it does blend in really nicely and it creates these nice soft lines. And this was pretty wet up here, so I might go in, do a couple more textured brick lines. There we have some fun texture.
Could you hold that up so we could see a little bit closer the beautiful textured brick?
This is fun. I made a smudge, but it's going to be okay because I'm going to paint right over it. It is pretty wet.
That looks great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then kind of the same thing. I'm going to do just some horizontal lines, some variances in these columns as well. So just similar colors. I think I might go a little bit darker myself for these. Just give it some more interest than just a flat wash. It's made of stone, so it's gonna have texture.
So we have another question.
Mm-hmm.
Someone is asking when we get to the pink of the flowers, what colors can they mix to get pink? And I'm assuming you'll probably do that on camera, but just so that they can mentally prepare.
Yes, so it's gonna be red and then a purple. These together will make a pink. Hopefully we can get it to super, kind of almost a hot pink like this, but we will try to get it to the brightest we can. And that's actually what we'll do next. So as soon as we're done adding our texture to our columns here, we'll get started mixing our pink. So same thing just for these columns. I'm doing just basically horizontal lines and I'm kind of layering them on top of each other. And they're wet, so they're all kind of blending together, but you can still see some of the shapes. So I'll give you guys a second to do that. we'll get another closer look. And I'm going to start filling in the pink next. So same thing for the pink. I'm going to mix it over here, and I'm going to start with some water. And I'm going to take red first. And get quite a bit of red. So I have red, and I'm going to slowly add in some purple. And I'll see if I can get it as bright as this example I made. Can you guys see that? Maybe I'll try. There you guys can see maybe the colors a little bit more that I'm mixing. They're not on wood, they're on a white background. So this is the pink I have so far. I actually have some open space around my painting, so I'm going to test it so you guys can see. It's pretty bright, that red and the purple. I might myself add a little bit more purple. And I'll give you guys a second to get this color, this hot pink. We're going to do a similar to the green area where we're going to do a wet into wet. So I'm going to take this base color pink, and inside I'm going to add some darker red and maybe even some purple. And one thing before we start the pink, we do want to make sure it's not too wet. Like for example, my green is still a little bit wet. I don't know if you guys can see, it's kind of still shimmering. So I'm going to make sure, I'm going to at least start where it's not wet. This one's not wet. This one over here. Don't want my pink to start mixing into my green because it will turn brown. And then just so you guys know, again, we're mixing our red and our purple to get this nice hot pink for our bright, beautiful flowers. And you can test it on the top, or if you have, some spare paper around you. Test your colors. All right, so I'm going to start just with my first little flower up here. Don't need to perfectly go in your shape. Don't make it a super hard line. Give it a little bit of, space to be a flower, a little bit of, wiggle room. It has petals, it has, things sticking out of it. And then also we just don't want to make it too wet. So if you have kind of like a little puddle, just soak it up and maybe dry off your brush real quick so then it's not too wet. And then to make this flower, not just one color, I'm going to actually just go straight with red from my palette. And then maybe do a couple little dots with the red, and we can see it's blending in. Then maybe I'll do the same thing with the purple. This is a really small flower, so it'll be hard to see it, but it'll be super noticeable on the big one. I don't know. You guys can see the variances, right? It's not just all one color. We have some pink, we have red, and we have some purple. And if you want to maybe make one side purple, that's, maybe the dark side. Maybe that's where the light's not hitting it. You can see kind of the right side of the flower, I did more purple. That is where the sun might not be hitting it as much. Now I'm going to do this one over here, this little one. Do the same thing. So I'm just going to start out with my nice base pink color I did. I'm gonna soak up any extra water. I like to think of my brush when it's dry, it acts as like a little vacuum. It vacuums it up. And then I'm gonna go in with just some extra red. So you guys can see, this is what it looks like before I add some extra color into it. And I'm not painting, I'm really just taking the color and I'm doing just little tiny dots. And because the paint is wet, it's just mixing in really nicely, doing a nice natural blending for me. So we can see it looks a lot different than just the flat color. It gives it some definition. Gonna go into my big flower here. Same exact thing, it's just a little bit bigger. So we might be able to see some of these differences. I'm gonna start with my base pink. And don't just make it round on the top. Give it some shape, some wiggles. So filled in, gonna soak up any extra water. And let's see this one. I could be a little bit more specific here. So I think I'll do it darker towards the middle of my flower. So I'm gonna go more with the red and purple, extra dots, the wet into wet towards the middle. I'm gonna make that the brighter, the highlight of the flower. And if you can see your lines, you can just kind of follow those lines if you want with color straight from your palette. So there I did some red. I'm gonna go purple. Ooh, that's a lot. I'll dry, kind of soak that up, spread it around. That's pretty bright there. And then I'll just take a little more red purple into my petals here. And I actually don't like that purple in the middle, so I'm gonna mix it in. It was a little too bright for my taste. There we have nice flower. And you can see it almost looks three-dimensional just by adding a little bit darker color in one area. We're gonna do the same thing for our next two flowers. So if you're there, go ahead. If you're not, just keep going. We're starting with our base color. Filling it in, soaking up extra water. And then towards the center top of our flower, giving it a little more color straight from the palette. I'm gonna go around the edge of this, the edge of the flower. If you guys want to maybe experiment with colors, red and blue will make purple. So you could try to see what, if you put blue into your paint color you made, see if it goes purple. Maybe I'll try that on this flower. Take a little bit of blue and see what it does if I mix it, if it mixes into the red. There'll be a different color purple than the one in your palette usually. See any difference there? Maybe a little bit. keep moving on. If you added a couple more flowers, that's great. Gonna do my last one here. I'm gonna do the same exact thing, darker in the middle. Try to make sure your flower doesn't have too many edges that are white, like especially this one here. I know it's kind of in the middle of the green. We want it to be a full shape if possible. All right, so we have our flowers. Just a few more things left to paint. This background. So if you're still working on your flowers, go ahead. I'm gonna start mixing a color for my background. I'm gonna use this brown I already made. This was my base for my bricks. And I'm just gonna darken it because in here there's less light, it's darker. So brown is close to orange. The opposite of orange on a color wheel is blue. So I'm gonna add blue. If yours goes more towards red, add green. But mine is orangey, so I'm gonna add blue. And did you see how it turned almost like a gray? So let's test that. Yeah, it's a nice dark, almost brown gray color. And I'll give everyone maybe like 1 more minute to finish our flowers. If you do have extra water in your flowers, try to soak it up a little bit. So just help you in the drying time. Just again, use your brush like a little vacuum, dry it off, and then soak up the extra. Now in this background area, I'm going to do something called a graduated wash. So this means it's going to go from darker to lighter. It's going to graduate from darker to a lighter color. This is really easy. It's basically the same kind of flat wash that we did here. But as we get like halfway, instead of picking up more paint, I'm going to add actually water. Now, if it doesn't work out, we can always just go with a little bit darker color at the top. So I'm going to get started with that. I'm going to make sure I have plenty of either a dark brown or gray color, whatever you guys can kind of mix up. Again, if we want to go more gray, don't use black. If you have orange, add blue. If you have a more red color, add green. This will make it gray. Black is very messy watercolors. It'll basically make all your colors super muddy looking. So we don't want to add black if we can avoid it.
We do have a question for you, Melanie.
Yes.
And I think this is a good time to ask it since we're waiting for people to give them a little extra time to catch up.
Yeah.
Bianca says, this is so much fun. Are there any other areas of the mission that you enjoy painting?
So I recently did a painting of a picture I took. It was of a monarch butterfly sitting on a poppy. We actually featured the picture on our website. So I'm more of a painter from pictures. So I take pictures all the time and I paint them. And here I will show you guys. This is the picture I took, and then this was the painting I did from it. So I do definitely enjoy painting here at the mission. There's so many beautiful things. I'm just not one to paint in person. I don't have the patience to do it in person, I think. There's too many things changing, too many things distracting me. But yeah, thank you for asking. It's definitely a great place to visit and paint and to get pictures for inspiration. So I'm going to go ahead and start the wash in my background here. So I'm going to start at the top with my kind of dark brownish gray color. I'm going to carry it on the outside along my arch. I'm going to make sure I have plenty of paint on my brush. Now, the reason it's darker at the top because less light can get in at the top, right? It's really dark under these archways, under the corridors at the mission. So we're going dark at the top, and then as you go down, more light is entering in. So I'm bringing this wash, oops, and I just smudged my flower. Not a problem. Now, I'm sort of running out of paint. I didn't quite mix enough, but that's okay because I'm going to start graduating it. So instead of taking paint, I'm actually going to take water. I'm just going to pick up some water. The paint I already have here is just going to come down with the water. And you'll see after a couple goes, it gets lighter. And I smudged my flower right there. So I'm just going to go over that. Doesn't matter, it's okay. Go around on my flowers. Now, if your flowers are wet, you don't want to touch them with your wet paint because they will bleed. Now, this didn't go quite as dark as I wanted. So my paint is still wet. So I'm actually just gonna make a little bit darker color. I'm gonna take my orange and my blue. Again, those together will make gray. And because my paint is still wet, I'm just gonna add in a little bit darker here at the top. And it'll just, same as, the green wet into wet, it's just gonna do a nice gradual bleeding into the other color I did. And if you don't like the line, you just add a little bit of water or just keep bringing it down a little more. Now, just like with anything else, I'm going to soak up any extra water. So I definitely have some here at the bottom. Dry my brush, soak it up. Now, it's not quite as dark as my original, but I think that's okay. I'm going to leave it as is. I'll give you guys a second to get caught up there. The last thing I'm going to do before I add in my lines, so that Sharpie line that'll help me define everything, is I'm going to just add some leaves to my flowers. They kind of look like they're just floating in a big open space right now. So I'm just going to add some darker green kind of at the bottom of my flowers, almost like I did here. Just give it a little more shape to that. But go ahead, get your wash there in the background. Nice graduated wash, darker to lighter. And if you don't like the colors that you did, you can always, if it's still wet, maybe give it a little bit of, variance. Like here I have maybe a little bit of green. Go in with a little bit of orangey yellow. Just give it a slight differences. So it's not just a flat color. And if it's still wet, it should just bleed in real nicely. Create a nice kind of gradual change.
While you add those variances, we have another question.
Yes.
This is also from Bianca. She said, do you ever paint the swallows? We know that they like the mission.
So I haven't done a painting yet of the swallows. They are super tiny little fast birds. So, I've wanted to do a painting, but, sitting down, I rarely see them. So they're always moving. They're definitely a very fun shape. I can do maybe like a little one here. They kind of have this swoopy wing, little tiny head and body, and then this kind of like forked tail. So if you want to add maybe with your Sharpie or with your black paint at the end, a little, it's not the best, but a little swoopy swallow bird. That's kind of the traditional shape they make. But I have not done a painting of them. But I know I've definitely seen some, the bell wall with little birds flying all around. They're just very tiny, and I just haven't painted them yet. But yeah, maybe you could draw a little swallow or paint a little swallow flying in front of your archway. If you didn't do any sort of extra color in this background area, I do suggest it because I think it just adds a little more interest to that area. I put some red and yellow in here. Definitely helps to show that area. Next, we're going to go back to our green. So hopefully you guys still have your green. Nice dark green. Again, if yours is a little bright, like it's, not a very natural color green, try adding some red to it. This is, again, opposite of green on the color wheel. It is its complement, and so it will dull it and make it darker. And just around my flowers here, I'm just going to add a couple leaf shapes, and I'll define the leaf with a Sharpie. But just around at least my 3 big flowers, I'm going to add some leaves. So that's what I'm going to do now. Give it just a little point. Bring it down almost to like a stem. We don't want them to be too bright on it, but at least enough we can see it. So there's one. If you went outside, if you did some sort of border, don't worry, because you can either trim it, cover it with a, some sort of canvas border. Okay, I'm going outside my line here. I'm going to do a couple more leaves for this flower here. And maybe a stem. So there. Some leaves. And I'm going to soak up any extra water I have. This is kind of our final painting step. Now, I'll let you guys get caught up there. For the Sharpie or permanent marker, we're going to add, it does have to be dry. So if yours is a little bit wet before we start the Sharpie, maybe, dry it out a little bit, blow on it. we do want it to be dry, because otherwise the Sharpie won't work. So I'm gonna definitely dry mine a bit, but I'll leave it here so you guys can see it. Maybe I'll just fan it from here. Luckily, we were able to jump around our painting, so it being wet didn't really mess us up time-wise. But for this, we do want it to be dry. A lot of watercolors who paint, say like professionally, or do it as a hobby, will have a blow dryer dedicated, their painting blow dryer, and in between layers will blow dry. So there's no blending when they don't want it. Or some watercolor artists are super flexible and use the wet into wet and just jump around the painting. So they're able to, always have some color going in.
So we have a question from Charlotte asking if you have drawn the mission before, and I know you have.
Yes.
Do you want to talk to everybody a little bit about the sketch program that we did and any other drawings that you've done around the mission?
Definitely, yeah. So before we closed down last year, right in March when everything was shutting down, we did have a architecture sketching tour that I was leading here at the mission. We learned about perspective, and we just went around with a pencil and a clipboard and some newsprint and just practiced our sketching. In-person sketching architecture is very hard, but it was really fun and a lot of people enjoyed it. We only were able to do about 3 weeks of that before we shut down. We haven't been able to open that again, but hopefully soon we can have, people come and be able to sketch with me in person here. We did a Christmas sketch of the Great Stone Church and Bell Wall. That was another live stream like this. So that was another time. And then, as I said, I don't usually draw while I'm here unless it was for that sketch tour, because I'm usually working either with the education department or guest services. But I definitely take a lot of pictures and I take them home and paint and draw them. So very fun being here, being able to take the pictures like I did for this painting that I did, and I then, painted it. Now I'm able to share it with you guys. So definitely love to paint and draw the mission. Great place for inspiration. Definitely suggest, if you guys are able to visit, bring a camera or bring, a piece of paper, draw something that you, see that's beautiful, that you like. I don't know if you guys can see, I'm fanning my painting with a board. Hopefully you guys aren't quite as wet as mine, but I'm actually dry up here. So I'm going to start in with my Sharpie, assuming everyone's doing okay. Time-wise, we're keeping up. And I'm going to just start by actually defining my arch. I'm going to start with the columns I have here. So same thing that when I drew them, I'm going to just draw them again. So I kind of have my trapezoid shape. With this one, I don't know if you guys can see that. I kind of did just like some little extra lines inside showing where the stone came. Try to make them random if you can. Just adds a little more interest. And then I'll just bring that column down and it just disappears basically behind my greenery. We'll do the same thing on this side. If your painting's wet, don't put your hand on it. Try to keep it up. So doing that shape. Same thing, I'm gonna add just some little extra lines to give it some texture, defining maybe those lines I did with the paint. And they almost look like bricks. And same thing, bring this down. Mine meets my flower right there. Now I'm going to go through and do my big arch line. So we drew it in pencil, so I'm going to follow my pencil line best I can. See how much that just helps to define that shape? Now we can really see it's an arch. We'll add our line here, gives us some perspective. Going back, you can see that it's three-dimensional. Make sure it meets there. Total difference just adding those lines. This is kind of a special, almost like illustration style watercolor. If you look at books a lot, usually it is watercolor painting for the illustration, and they define either characters or shapes with a marker. So this is very illustrative in its style. Now for my roses, let's see, those two little ones are dry. That one's dry. I'm going to do the same, I call it, again, wiggle technique to do the roses, or they're actually not roses, but to do my flowers. I'm going to start, make sure it's dry. Usually you touch it with the back of your hand. Make sure it's dry. I'm going to do some wiggle shapes in the middle. This is like the fluffy part where we can't really see a full petal inside. You'll want to define the kind of top part. And then for the petals, just same thing, just give them, don't make them just perfectly round. Kind of follow maybe your natural paint line you did. Petals are very, natural, not always perfect shapes. So there's one flower, and let's do the rest of them. Again, check, make sure it's dry. Defining each little petal. Even if, you're a little bit over into your green or into your background, it's fine. It doesn't matter because the Sharpie or permanent marker will define that shape. So we're getting there.
While you continue, Melanie, we have another question from Bianca.
Okay.
She asks, do you ever paint the chapel? And do you have any tips on how to identify a perfect place to paint?
Definitely, it'll depend on your skill level. The chapel, although it's gorgeous and I love the frescoes in it and the retablo, the gold retablo is beautiful. It is very detailed and definitely details that I myself would not want to paint. I'm definitely more of a flower and plant person as terms of subject. If you're able to get a decent sketch of, say, the chapel or anything, you almost always will be able to do a painting. It's just, how the level of detail will define, how much work and the skill level you'll need to make it actually look like that. Flowers, super easy. Just a simple archway, very easy. But definitely I would start out, if you're just starting out, start out with less, just a single arch, or, just maybe a window or a small, if you're in the chapel, a statue. But definitely just go with what you feel comfortable and what you can feel like you can sketch. You don't want to try to paint something that you struggle even to, say, draw. So still doing that kind of wiggle technique. The ones in the back here, I'm not going to make as detailed. Just going to give them a couple lines. Just kind of layer them up. It's almost like I'm making petals out of the colors that I laid down. One more over here. There we go. And the only thing we'll add a little more Sharpie to is our leaves. Now mine are still slightly wet. This one's okay. For the leaves, very simple. Don't need to outline perfectly the whole thing. I usually just do almost like, like a wedge shape. And then just give it maybe a line in the middle, lines at the top. And it doesn't even have to be a solid line. You can maybe give it a broken line. Meaning, it's not all one. It stops and then goes again. But I'm just going to define these little leaves down here. And then what I mean by broken line is, it doesn't have to go all the way. You can stop, let it start again. I'm going to do these ones over here. And my marker is not liking, it's slightly wet, so it's getting a little smudgy on me. And then I'm just going to let the stem just disappear into imaginary leaves that are below. Now this one's dry up here, so I'll give that one a little bit of leaves. And same thing over here. And then this one's almost dry, still a little wet. Go on the outside of the wet part. And even if you don't like the shape you painted, you can make up your own shape with the Sharpie. And there we are. Now, final step with any artwork is you must sign it. You must own up to your work. You can either do an initial or write your full name. You can do it in paint or Sharpie. I got my Sharpie here, so I'm going to sign right here. I do, just as a personal preference, the first 3 letters of my first name and the first 3 letters of my last name, which is Mel and then Ray. That's how I'm going to sign it. And there we are. Hopefully you guys found this super, maybe not easy, but realize it's not as difficult to paint something like architecture as you might have thought before this. And we learned, some good watercolor techniques. And yeah, do we have any final questions about anything art or our painting related?
No final questions right now. I think you've been able to answer them as we've gone. We are getting people saying thank you.
Okay, good. You're welcome.
Yeah,
everyone.
I think people have really enjoyed it. So thank you, Melanie.
Of
and
course.
Thank you to everybody who has attended both on Zoom and Facebook. Hopefully we can do more of these again. And we hope that everyone enjoys all of the other Earth Day videos that we'll have on our website. So thank you all. Bye, everybody.
Bye.